Dad's affair partner now wants her daughter to stay with me during the school year, but I've never once considered them part of my family. When I said no, they twisted my refusal into leverage against her, until eventually the girl showed up at my place having a breakdown. Honestly, I hesitated to even write this out, but since everyone close to me is too biased to give fair advice, I figured I'd throw it on the internet and see what strangers think. I'm 29 now, but when I was 14, I found out that my dad had been living an entirely separate life behind my mom's back. Turns out, he had a 1-year-old daughter with one of his employees. She's 16 now. Back then, it shook our family to its core. My brother, who's 31 now, cut off all contact with Dad for an entire year, and as for me, I couldn't even look the man in the eye after that. I still don't know if my mom had any idea about the affair or if she just ignored it, but I do remember how desperate she seemed to keep her marriage together. Maybe it was because Dad was the one making the money, and he made plenty. Who knows? Either way, after rounds of counseling and therapy, they stayed together. That didn't mean the other family was cut out, though, the way you'd think would be normal. Dad stopped being romantically involved with the woman, but they stayed friends. My mom, for whatever reason, even played along, and it gave off this bizarre sister-wives vibe that always felt wrong to me. Holidays were the worst. This woman who almost destroyed our family would be right there at the table, smiling like nothing happened. She knew Dad was married, and she didn't care. And then there was this child we were all supposed to treat as our sister, like it was no big deal. From that point on, nothing ever felt like family anymore. My brother avoided Christmas and Easter for years. Then, when the girl, let's call her Ally, was about 4, he suddenly decided to be a brother to her. It was a complete flip, though he still refuses to speak with Dad or Ally's mom. Maybe I'm bitter, but I've never seen Ally's mom as anything other than a homewrecker, and I can't look at Ally without being reminded of it. I know it's my dad's fault too, but when I was younger it was easier to aim my anger at them than at him. I've never treated Ally like a sister, and I've been upfront about that. It's created tension in the family that's still there to this day. There's too much history to unpack here, so let me just get to the present issue. Ally recently decided to transfer schools for reasons I honestly don't care about. For context, in my country high schools often focus on specialties like art, pastry making, hairdressing, and so on. Ally had been going to a grammar school, which is more general and usually a stepping stone to college, but apparently it was too tough for her. She dropped out and got accepted into a decent art school that happens to be near where I live. She and her mom live close to my parents, which is about a 3-hour drive from me. So commuting would be rough for her, though not impossible. 2 nights ago, we had a family dinner. Yes, Ally and her mom were there, which already put me in a bad mood when the subject came up. They danced around it at first, like they were waiting for me to offer, but I stayed quiet. Eventually, they came out and asked if Ally could live with me during the school year. She'd be there Monday through Friday and then go home on weekends and holidays. They also pointed out that since I'm an illustrator, it would be good for Ally to be around a real artist. Which is laughable, considering these same people used to say my job was useless. Here's why I said no. There are dorms right next to her new school. They're not luxury, but they're decent. I don't like Ally and never have. We don't have a relationship. Being related by blood doesn't magically make us family. My brother lives only about an hour away from the school, which is way closer than me, and he actually gets along with Ally. Years ago, when I desperately needed help, I went to Ally's mom as a last resort, and she literally laughed in my face and told me, "We're not family." Now she wants to pretend we are? The hypocrisy is unbelievable. I live in a small apartment. Yes, technically I have a second bedroom, but it's rented out to my best friend. They didn't even ask nicely, they demanded it. And when I hesitated, they ganged up on me like vultures. The excuse they keep pushing is that Ally has anxiety about living in a dorm with strangers. I get that, but I also lived in dorms with people who didn't even like me, and I survived. Their reasoning is basically, she's your sister, God wants you to be a family, and you should throw out your roommate to make space. First off, I don't believe in God. Second, she is not my sister. Not in my heart. Not in my life. To me, she's just a stranger with my dad's DNA. I'll be honest, I never put in the effort to get to know Ally, and I don't have any desire to start now. Maybe that makes me the bad guy, because it's obviously not her fault she was born into this mess. Still, I can't force myself to care just because other people think I should. At first, I pretended to think over their request, just to keep up appearances, but as soon as the family dinner went from calm conversation to screaming and demands, I shut it down. I said no, and I stuck with it. Things only cooled off when Ally stormed out of the house. I assumed she ran home, and then I was basically told to leave. Which was fine, because I was already heading out anyway. The parting shot? That I should act like an adult before we talk again, and maybe hurry up and enroll myself in kindergarten before the spots fill up. That was the last straw. I'd made myself perfectly clear. When Ally's mom texted me later to continue the discussion, I left her on read. When Dad tried calling, I ignored him. I wasn't going to sit there and be yelled at like a child until I gave in. Some people online have warned me that the family might just show up at my place with a moving truck full of Ally's stuff. Honestly, I'd laugh at the idea if it didn't sound so much like something they would actually do. That's exactly their style, our way or no way. Others advise me to block them completely, since it's not my responsibility. And they're right. If Ally's mom wants her daughter closer to school so badly, then she should be the one to move, instead of forcing a 16-year-old into a home where she's not wanted. One commenter asked why I even keep showing up to these toxic Sunday dinners. Truth is, apart from Dad and Ally's mom, I do still have a decent relationship with most of my family. We usually meet a couple of times a month, sometimes more, sometimes less, and we keep in touch through WhatsApp. But those family meals? They're a nightmare. Here's the kicker: after Ally left that night, Dad and his ex told me they'd already convinced her that if she acted nice and respectful, I'd take her in. So when I said no, it must have blindsided her. Supposedly she was even saving up money to help with my bills, though knowing my dad, he probably embellished that part just to make me look heartless. As for my mom, she stayed in this circus because, years ago, I saw her literally on her knees begging Dad not to leave her for his mistress. It was painful to watch, embarrassing, even. From what I've gathered, her attitude became, well, it happened. Might as well make the best of it. She worked hard to bury her resentment and even tried to build some sort of relationship with Ally. But she's an immigrant with no real support network here, and moving back home wasn't an option. Both my brother and I once offered to rent a bigger place so she could live with us, but at the last minute she backed out. She's clung to this marriage even though Dad was fully ready to leave her for the other woman. I pity her more than anyone. And these family dinners? They're pure chaos. Sometimes Ally and her mom are there without warning, and sometimes they even stay overnight in the guest rooms. My mom, who used to be a strong, independent woman, now lets all of this play out under her own roof. Watching it feels like watching someone willingly humiliate themselves. It's been cathartic to finally let all of this out here, because aside from my best friend, the one who shares my apartment, nobody else really gets it. Most people either excuse the behavior or try to paint me as the villain. Even my brother seems oddly unbothered these days. Once, I showed up for dinner and walked in on Ally's mom wrapped in a towel, brushing her teeth like she owned the place. I just turned around and left. And then, the thing I feared actually happened. Ally showed up at my apartment completely unannounced, having a breakdown in the hallway. My roommate let her in because she didn't know what else to do. I never seriously thought they'd dump her on me, but sure enough, here we are. Here's what went down. My best friend called me in a panic after letting Ally inside, and I immediately tried reaching Molly, that's what I'll call Dad's ex. No answer. Then I rang Dad over and over until he finally picked up. When I politely told him to come get Ally out of my apartment, he brushed me off, saying to just let it be. When I pressed harder, he said he'd pick her up the next day. I snapped and told him no, he had until midnight to come get her, or I'd drop her off at the police station myself. Part of me knows I should have called the police right away, but it's complicated. Molly already has a record, petty theft, nothing major, but she probably doesn't want another charge. Still, that wasn't my problem. When I finally got home, Ally was sitting on the sofa crying. My roommate explained that Ally had been shocked to see her instead of me and nervously asked if my roommate was just visiting or if she was moving out. My friend had to explain that no, she actually lives there. Things spiraled quickly once Ally was inside my apartment. What started as a tense conversation turned into her yelling at my roommate, who kept trying to calm her down before it escalated into what looked like a full-blown panic attack. I wasn't there at the time, but my roommate described it that way, and I have no reason to doubt her. When I finally got home, Ally turned all that anger on me. She screamed that I was a horrible sister, a liar, a leech, you name it. I could understand her calling me a bad sister, since I've never tried to play that role, but liar and leech? That part stunned because it made no sense. Eventually, I got her to calm down enough that we weren't broadcasting our family drama to the entire building. That's when the truth started to come out. Apparently, 4 months ever since she dropped out of her last school, my dad and Molly had been dangling the idea of living with me as leverage. They used it to control her: get better grades or you can't move in, clean your room or no move, delete your social media, ditch your friends, or forget about living with your sister. Basically, they turned me into some kind of prize she had to earn. No wonder she showed up at my door convinced it was already settled. To make it worse, Molly had even told her I'd agreed to a trial week. I never agreed to anything. They just assumed I'd cave, like I'd done too many times in the past to keep the peace. They thought I wouldn't dare crush Ally's dream once she was physically here. As frustrating as it was, it did lead to the first real conversation Ally and I have ever had. We spent about 40% of it venting about our dad, another 40% about Molly, and the last 20% actually talking about art. For a moment, I saw her less as the other kid and more as just a person. I'm not saying I suddenly loved her or wanted to adopt her, but it was something. That night she crashed in my bed while I sat awake waiting for my dad. He finally showed up around 11 p.m., furious that I didn't just let her stay the night. But I was even angrier. After listening to Ally's side, I wanted to hear his, but he didn't have much of a defense. I let loose on him for 5 solid minutes, barely pausing for breath, and by the time he tried to respond, he either forgot half of what I said or didn't understand it. He just muttered that he'd call me later to talk it through. Well, later came. And what I found out left me emotionally wiped. Turns out Molly is drowning financially. She's buried in loans she'll probably never pay off with her job, and the government is already garnishing her wages. She had to sell her apartment and planned to move into a tiny studio, basically a shoebox, for herself and Ally. I've seen it. Calling it cramped would be generous. That's why they pushed so hard for me to take Ally in. It wasn't about family, or art school, or me being a role model. They just wanted to dump responsibility on me. Against my better judgment, I let Ally stay for a short while. But it was impossible. She's clearly a troubled kid. I'd never noticed it before since I kept my distance. She had terrifying night terrors that kept my roommate awake. My friend has a physically demanding job and needs her sleep, so she was wrecked. On top of that, Ally didn't clean up after herself and even stole my watch. That was it for me. I told my dad to figure it out because I wasn't doing this. He begged. He promised she'd get better. And maybe she would, with time. But I wasn't willing to sacrifice my sanity and my roommate's peace of mind to get her there. I offered one condition: I'd only consider taking Ally in if she went to therapy. Molly flat out refused, saying she doesn't believe in therapy. Not surprising at all. So Ally went back to Molly. My dad wanted to take her in, but my mom put her foot down, which led to a huge fight. It got so bad my mom had a panic attack and had to be hospitalized. After that, Ally ended up back at Molly's, and Molly directed all her anger at me. According to her, I'm the only one who has space but refuse because I hate her and Ally. Hate is a strong word, but I won't deny there's truth in it. My brother also piled on, even though he has his own house. But since his girlfriend just had a baby, apparently that means I'm the one who should sacrifice everything. He actually had the nerve to throw out the blood is thicker than water's line when I explained that my best friend lives with me and I'm not going to kick her out. Guess my blood doesn't count. Now I'm stuck in limbo. My dad keeps trying to convince my mom to let Ally live with them, and in the meantime, he throws snide remarks at me. Molly sends me passive-aggressive messages. My brother looks at me like I'm heartless. Honestly, I'm seriously considering going no contact at this point. Watching my whole family turn against me hurts more than I can put into words. At least I have my best friend. I feel awful for how much she suffered while Ally stayed with us, but I'm grateful she's still by my side. Right now, I'm drained. I can barely focus on work. Some people tell me to cut ties completely, and maybe they're right. As much as I hate the thought, staying connected to this circus feels like it'll eventually drive me insane. At this point, all I get from my family is drama, guilt trips, and messages telling me I'm a horrible person. Maybe the only way out is to walk away completely.